From a purely official point of view, the matter seems clear. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 4,500 years ago to create a fitting tomb for the powerful Pharaoh Cheops. But what if that's not true at all? What if the monumental structures built by the Egyptians actually served a completely different purpose? One that completely overturns our conventional view of history. There are indeed people who are convinced that the true signs of the Pyramid of Cheops are being deliberately concealed from us. There is no doubt that the ancient stone giant is still shrouded in mystery today. How exactly did the inhabitants of ancient times manage to pile up thousands upon thousands of blocks weighing tons to create such an architectural masterpiece? And could the mysterious shafts in the Queen's Chamber possibly help us uncover the historical truth? Be sure to stay tuned until the end and see for yourself what the supposedly oldest cover-up in history is all about. Presumably, approximately, estimated. Anyone who delves into the official texts on the Cheops, or simply the Great Pyramid, will quickly notice that the relevant sources are full of vague formulations that leave room for interpretation. As briefly mentioned at the beginning, it is above all the question of the exact construction techniques used by the ancient Egyptians that continues to fuel the wildest speculations to this day. Because let's face it, the Pyramids of Cheops consist of around 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. But that's just the average. The bottom line is that the inhabitants of the Pharaonic Empire managed to maneuver colossal blocks weighing up to 70 tons to dizzying heights and fit them precisely into their structures. Some of these extreme loads also came from quarries hundreds of kilometers away from the Giza Plateau. And yet, it is not only the overwhelming dimensions that transform the Pyramid of Cheops into an architectural marvel. With an original height of 146.6 meters, the pyramid was also aligned exactly to the 4 cardinal points, and with almost ridiculously precise sides whose length deviation is not even 1/1000th. How exactly the Egyptians achieved all this is not entirely clear. Although there are various theories, mainly based on ingenious ramp systems, none of them can be proven conclusively. But what about discoveries? What mystical funerary texts, precious grave goods, and royal mummies have already been unearthed here? Well, none at all. In fact, only 3 artifacts have ever been recovered from the Pyramid of Cheops to date. More precisely, in 1872, Scottish engineer Wayman Dixon came across a ball, a hook, and a fragment of cedar wood. And that was it. Well, not quite, because radiocarbon dating of the piece of wood revealed that it is half a millennium older than the official date of construction of the pyramid itself. The official explanation for this is that the rare material was so precious at the time that it was simply reused for 500 years. The general lack of artifacts is attributed to tomb raiders who plundered the structure hundreds of years ago. But how is it that the pyramid is associated with Pharaoh Cheops of all people? Well, the attribution was made based on graffiti found by construction workers, particularly in the relief chambers, which contained the king's name inside the pyramid. Despite all this, the tomb theory has long been considered hopelessly outdated in alternative circles. And to understand why this is so, we need only compare the Pyramid of Cheops with those sites that were undoubtedly used for burials. These include the legendary Valley of the Kings near the ancient Egyptian city of Thebes. The tombs created here are characterized above all by large passageways and extensive galleries. The passageways of the pyramid, on the other hand, are so narrow that an adult can barely squeeze through. But the magnificent interior of the necropolis tombs, with their works of art and hieroglyphics, also differs markedly from the simple appearance of the Giza giant. Furthermore, in the heart of the pyramid, we also encounter things that literally make us sit up and take notice. Anyone entering the structure via the narrow corridor, which measures just 90 by 90 centimeters, and climbing up from there must negotiate a series of steps. However, this is a modern installation. Originally, there was nothing but a bare, steep, rising passageway. Once you have mastered the narrow passage, you find yourself in the large gallery. Many visitors who enter the gallery, which is up to 8.74 meters high and a good 46 meters long, say that this section has some remarkable acoustic properties. Videos of this phenomenon can easily be found on YouTube, and we recommend everyone take a look, or rather a listen, to the relevant clips. Some people believe that the unique acoustics of the large gallery also suggest that it served a very special purpose that is unknown today. Officially, however, this area merely functions as a stabilizing element. Be that as it may, anyone hoping to find impressive decorations and hieroglyphics here will once again be disappointed. The mysteries of the sarcophagus. Anyone looking at a cross-section of the Pyramid of Cheops will inevitably be struck by a striking detail: the peculiar design of the so-called King's Chamber. In fact, it is the only royal burial chamber from the period between the 4th and 6th dynasties that has a flattened ceiling. Instead of constructing a gabled roof as was customary, the builders decided to place 9 granite beams over 6 meters long on the walls, which required the construction of special relief chambers. But what was the reason behind this unique construction decision? The most significant feature of the King's Chamber is, of course, the sarcophagus. Although, as mentioned above, no mummy or grave goods have ever been found in the Pyramid of Cheops. The existence of the massive granite coffin leaves no doubt that this is clearly a burial site. Or is it? Well, at this point, critics point to a number of inconsistencies that are not so easy to place in a plausible context. Even conservative researchers agree that the construction of the sarcophagus, which was supposed to be the showpiece of the tomb, is significantly inferior to the design of the rest of the pyramid. Let's just compare the perfectly crafted stone blocks of the King's Chamber with the massive coffin. The rough shape and visible traces of workmanship leave the viewer with raised eyebrows. In view of this, some people even describe the sarcophagus with words such as shabby or inferior. And the fact that the coffin broke over time, leaving aside the exterior, leads some skeptics to believe that the sarcophagus was actually made much later than the pyramid. And when we look at older photographs of the King's Chamber, we see that there were other objects or pieces of rock lying around the sarcophagus. Given its massive appearance, is it really possible that these were pieces of the former coffin lid? The list of questions surrounding the supposed resting place of Pharaoh Cheops could go on and on. Why was the sarcophagus not placed in the center of the chamber? And what is the significance of the missing hieroglyphs and decorations? Well, these are questions that only the ancient Egyptians themselves probably knew the answers to. The mysterious Gantenbrink shaft. In addition to the King's Chamber, the Pyramid of Cheops is also known to contain the Queen's Chamber. But did you know that this room is not what its name suggests? In fact, this name, which is still in use today, dates back to a misinterpretation from an Arab period. The background to the shaft in this cavity is no less obscure. Located at a height of about 1.5 meters, they have a diameter of just 20 centimeters. And in fact, the passages, which have been sealed until then, were only rediscovered and forcibly opened by Wayman Dixon in 1872. In the process, the Scotsman also came across the 3 artifacts we mentioned earlier in the front part of the northern shaft. These objects are generally interpreted as so-called model grave goods, which were intended to serve as tools for Cheops in the afterlife. But why were the objects placed in a sealed shaft? Well, we don't know. What we do know, however, is that the northern shaft is blocked by an iron bar after about 20 meters. The purpose of this barrier is unclear. Officially, it is said that it may have been left behind by Dixon when he explored the passages. In any case, due to this obstacle, the team led by German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink decided in 1993 to first take a closer look at the southern shaft. After about 2.3 meters, it makes a steep 40-degree turn. About 60 meters further on, the robot vehicle that was sent in came face to face with a polished limestone block. As this is adorned with 2 heavily weathered copper fittings, many observers see it as a kind of door. But in order to finally look behind the stone barrier, it had to be drilled through in 2002. However, the researchers only discovered another small cavity, which presumably marks the end of the shaft. In the same year, however, the northern shaft was also investigated further, and the experts once again detected a stone block with copper fittings that made it impossible to proceed any further. Ultimately, it was not until 2011 that the blocking stone and the small chamber behind it were investigated again, and with the help of the robot Jedi, which was equipped with a movable endoscope, the experts made some exciting discoveries this time. The new panoramic view revealed that the back of the barrier is also smoothly polished, with the copper fittings forming two eyelets. In addition, Jedi captured some red markings on the floor of the small chamber. However, the significance of these markings has not yet been conclusively clarified. They are construction worker graffiti. Well, probably, that is. Apart from that, however, there is of course another question that arises. What was the purpose of the mysterious shafts in the Queen's chamber? Why did the ancient Egyptians decide to create small passageways that lead to proverbial nowhere? And why were they later sealed again? If these were ventilation shafts, it seems surprising, to say the least, that they do not lead to the outside. An alternative theory suggests that these are the very corridors through which, according to belief, the pharaoh's soul ascended to heaven. The passages showed the king the way to the immortal stars of the northern sky, but in order for the ruler to embark on this journey, false doors or ritual corridors were needed. But if the shafts of the Queen's chamber really served this purpose, whether as actual burial corridors or as so-called model corridors, why do they end 15 meters before the outside? Wouldn't the pharaoh's soul then have ended up in a dead end? Furthermore, there would have been no need for a passage leading south to ascend to the northern sky. In fact, we know of no other pyramid that has such a corridor orientation. Furthermore, we should not ignore another important point. The pyramid texts on which our assumptions about the ancient Egyptians' beliefs about the afterlife are based were not handed down until 250 years after the construction of the supposed tomb of Cheops. Your new subscription will be activated immediately after clicking. Simply press the thumb icon and subscribe to never miss another video from us. See you soon!